If you are an estate agent, letting agent, or someone who is interested in the property market, then this, the UK Property Market Stats Show, is for you. My name is Chris Watkin. Each week I'm joined by a special guest. This week it is Iain White. We'll come back to Iain in a second. Why should you be watching this show? Well, the British are obsessed with the property market. And when the Land Registry throws its stats out, everyone drops their tools and has a look at what they're saying. The problem is with the Land Registry, they're looking at sales that took place 8, 9, 10 months ago. The Halifax and Nationwide are looking at data at sales from 2 or 3 months ago. We're looking at last week. We're looking at week 6 of 2025, which is Monday the 10th, all the way through and including Sunday the 16th of February. We will be looking at what's happening in the property market to house prices, listings, price reductions, sales agreed, fall throughs, the works. The show itself will last approximately 1 hour, split roughly in half. The first half talks about the UK property market. The second half looks at a town or a city. And this week we are going to St Albans in Hertfordshire. If you're a St Albans agent, you'll be wanting to watch that very, very closely. If you're not a St Albans agent, then you might want to dismiss that part. However, we are going to be using a bit of kit which enables us to work out which is the best estate and letting agent in St Albans using lots and lots of different metrics. So if you're an agent who is finding it challenging with overvaluing or agents with cheap fees, this bit of kit using independent data will show you which agent is best. So you might want to watch that part of the show because if you really are a better agent in your town or city, then you could potentially use the same kit I'm using to prove that you are a better agent, get those properties, stop losing those listings, and get decent fees. This week, I'm joined by Iain White. I like to call him an estate agent guru. He doesn't like that phrase, but I'm still going to call him that because that's what he is. He was big in the game at Romans before it got sold out, and then now in the last decade has been a coach, a guide, a supporter of small, medium, and large size estate agency brands. He also is a big fan of great prop tech and basically a fantastic source of information on the property market and a very good friend of mine. Thanks for joining me today, Iain.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Chris.
Bless you. Well, you're a regular supporter of the show. You come back. We have, ladies and gentlemen, we have a rotation of about 8 or 9 people, and Ian's always on the show and it's excellent value for money. So without further ado, Iain, should we go and have a look at the stats for this week and see where we are?
Yes, indeed. Let's
have a look. Here we go. So without further ado, we always start with the listings. And what happens is this, I'll just spend a minute or so going through the stats, and then Iain can then give his thoughts. Year to date, we are on a 204,604 properties that have come onto the market, which is 9% higher than 2024 at 187,000 and 10.3% higher than the normal years of 17, 18 and 19. The white line on this graph here shows us the number of weekly listings on a week-by-week basis. The red line is 2024, the yellow line is 23, and then we also have the 17, 18, and 19 figures. Ladies and gentlemen, all these graphs that you see here are available to download off YouTube. If you go to the YouTube description, the write-up, and scroll all the way down, there is a link there and you can download them. All I ask is that you don't use them on social media. But you can use them in the valuations to show that you know what you're talking about. The average price of a property coming on the market this week is a princely sum of 416,900, and as I said, 36,000. This is week 6 in isolation compared to all the other week 6s going back to 2017. Iain, what's your thoughts on listings?
Well, look, I think we all know that there is, plenty coming into the marketplace. We all know that there is plenty of choice available to buyers, and I think your later slide will show that that is translating into some reasonable numbers of sales. So at the moment, if you're on the sales side of the industry, from a volume pipeline, there's quite a lot of good stuff going on. There are some concerns around transaction times. But the starting point of any agency is having the stock to sell, and that is not a problem as we speak today. Most agents are carrying and have and are receiving instructions in good enough volume to be able to make a very decent fist of their early year results.
Indeed, and this graph here, ladies and gentlemen, shows you the stock levels of property. We always close the book on the between the months. So this is the number of properties that were on the market on the 31st of Jan at night time going into the 1st of Feb. 659,000, which again is, slightly higher than what it was being seen in the same time of year of 17, 18 and 19. And what I would just, people say, well, if there's too much supply, it's like the Goldilocks, isn't it? If there's too little, which there was in back end of 21, then no one was putting their houses on the market because there was nothing to buy. But again, if there's too many properties, then there's too much supply, and supply and demand means house prices go down. Just to give you some reference, the number of properties for sale in 2008 was 1.4 million. So it doesn't concern me too much about the number of properties for sale, but when we start getting to the nines or 9 or a million, that's when the alarm bells should start ringing. Interestingly, Ian, you mentioned sales. We might as well look at this whilst we're here. And this is the number of properties that are presently in estate agent sales pipelines, again at 31st of January, going into the 1st of Feb. And again, pipelines are were nice and full, which again is really rare for a Q1, isn't it?
Yes, it is, because normally we exchange more out in October, November, December than we put in. I think that's partly because exchanges did get stuck, and partly because certainly November and December, and so far, January and the early part of February has been a lot stronger than most people would normally anticipate. Partly because of stamp duty deadline, partly because of the availability of funds, partly because interest rates have started to creep down. Um, yeah, so I mean, look, the agents should be filling their boots, but they do need to probably look at that number of stock that's for sale and start to look at it as, well, how many of it's 30 days old unsold, how much of it's 60 days unsold, how much of it's 90 days unsold, and start to do surgery on the longer on the market properties, because they're either going to become heavyweights on your reputation because they're going to be a sign of failure, or they're going to become someone else's instruction and someone else's fee.
Very much so. Let's move on to price reductions. And at this moment in time, and again, we do this in a month in arrears, and I like to do this on a weekly basis. I don't put it on the graph until the end of the month. We are running at still around that 12 or 13% mark. So we are reducing 12 or 13% of the properties that we have on our books. The average price of a property that is being reduced is just shy a few £100 less than 400,000. And as I said, we've reduced 21,000, which again looks good. But when you consider stock levels, like we said, are much higher at the moment, then really 12%. And again, we say this most weeks, 12 or 13% of your properties being reduced is simply not good enough when you consider that still 53, that number just doesn't change, has not changed in 2 years. 53% of properties that leave estate agents' books, you get paid on, you get exchanged, and 47% you get unpaid, wasting your time and the vendor's time.
Yeah, I mean the sell through rate is what separates the good from the great. I mean, I know the average of 53 is hard to shift, um, because it's over such a wide volume of data you're looking at, but it's very easy to shift on a local individual office by office level if you just do the right things. And that's the biggest difference you can make to your annual turnover is improving your sell through rate. Um, through correct guidance to your clients, and obviously absolutely first class marketing to make sure you leave no stone unturned in the pursuit of a buyer. Um, if you do those two things, you'll get a great reputation, you'll sell a high percentage of your stock, and you'll earn more money.
It's interesting. I was talking to an agent from Norfolk this week, actually not this week, this morning, and we were looking at his stats. And for every 100 houses he puts on the market, he's shifting 64.5% of them, as in exchanging on 64%. The corporate in the town is 38%.
Say that
And
again, Chris. Just say that again to make sure I took that on board.
so he's exchanging on 64.8%
Of what he lists, yeah.
of what he lists. His corporate his His corporate competitor in the town is at 38%.
Yeah, look, as long as he can substantiate and prove that using the right graphics from the various data companies, he should, if he can get through the door, he's got a good argument as to why Agent A isn't as solid as his offering.
Yeah,
Um, but also, he should be pointing his staff at all the stock that's on with that agent and saying, "There's your next listings. They're
very
there.
much.
They're already
Very,
identified. Those, but we know they want to move. They're past hurdle one. They've taken the steps of putting their house on the market. They're past hurdle two. You just need to make sure that you're hurdle number three. Go and intervene."
it's interesting that we were talking about the way how most estate agents, when they lose a property, they just say to the vendor, "Give us a call if you need me." Well, they won't do that because they'll feel stupid doing it. And I came up, shared with him my twin prong nurture process of using WhatsApp to send them properties and also properties that are competitors to theirs. Again, if anyone's watching this and they just want to have a chat with me, my numbers are all over social media. I'm more than happy to take phone calls between 7:30 and 8 o'clock.
There's a very short training line that can be used at the point that you find out and that you lose an instruction, which is to say to an agent, "Look, I accept I'm losing your business once. I will be devastated if they're unsuccessful and I lose it twice." Make sure you put that in writing and then follow your nurture process, because the easiest instruction to win is the one you've already met. Um,
I like that.
but if
Love, no, I don't like it. I love it.
Yeah, but it conditions you to a lot of agents are embarrassed about their loss, so they don't go back in. They
Yes,
take it
because they
personally.
fear it. They take it
Um,
personally.
and the owners, possibly if it's overpriced or there's been a battle on the fee or a little bit of both, or for whatever reason it was a um there, let's say they didn't take your advice and put it on 50,000 more. The embarrassment factor, you've got to give them an olive branch to come back. Otherwise, you just end up being not choice two either.
You are so, so right. So, so right. And I think that, we've got to get over. So, in essence, ladies and gentlemen, what Ian is saying is this: you've got to get over the chip on the shoulder that you feel let down and rejected that they didn't pick you. And number two, you need to give them an olive branch, as Ian says, an opportunity to come back to you without them feeling stupid. And that's again where we go wrong. Right, let's move over to gross sales. Okay. And this week we have sold 27,604 properties. The average price of a property selling is 358,400. Year to date, we are on 150,800 properties, which is 21% ahead of 2024 and 30.3% ahead of 17, 18, and 19. Now, we have been saying for the last few weeks that week one did start a little bit later this year, which meant that the numbers were slightly inflated to start with. But we're in week six, so that excuse is not cutting the whatever it cuts. I can't remember, but basically that argument is not so strong now. I would still reckon probably of that 150,000, you could probably knock off, I don't know, about 8 or 9,000 just to allow for that. But still, we are nicely ahead of 2024. And again, let's just show this graph here. That just shows it week six in isolation. Sorry, not week six in isolation. This is all the weeks. And again, it's doing well, mate, isn't it?
The market's good. I mean, obviously, we're seeing, various factors. We have got the artificial magnet of stamp duty creating certain things, although that's going to start to weaken as time goes by. We are seeing more private individual landlords choosing to exit the space and bringing their instructions to the marketplace as individual units, depending on how their portfolio is positioned. And we are just seeing naturally people looking to trade up and down, some of them down because the cost of living, mortgage rates have gone up while they've been on a fixed rate, and others are looking to move up market for the opposite reason, that they've been earning a little bit more money through wage inflation. They've been saving, and there is, as we've just seen, lots of stock available where negotiating or maybe getting a slightly better price on the purchase is coming into focus. So the market is got all the despite what's going on in the economy and with the government and the cost of living and all the other taxation things that are starting to bite, actually the microeconomics are pretty strong.
Just shows that the property market really isn't swayed by external. Of course, in the medium term it is, but in the short term, people are just getting on with their lives. Let's move on. The price difference between a property coming on the market is 416 versus the ones that are actually selling 358. There's always a difference because higher priced properties have a lower propensity to sell. I know, Ian, you have an opinion that you on that bigger properties should sell just at the same rate as smaller ones, don't you? Do you want to share that with the ladies and gentlemen watching?
It's not so much that I believe that they should sell at a faster rate. I mean, there are obviously
Not
there are a few.
faster, but the percentage of bottom line is that higher priced properties have a lower percentage chance of selling. And you think that's down to overvaluing. You've said a number of times on the show.
Yeah, I believe that if an agent who typically might be his average price might be a three-bedroom semi at 400,000, and he's suddenly presented with a five-bed detached country home, he or she is more likely to use valuation or overvalue through nervousness of offending or getting it wrong, rather than necessarily doing the relevant research or getting the right expertise to give correct and accurate information. And therefore, um, whilst clients are blamed for being greedy, in reality, they're acting on false information supplied by the industry often.
It's a classic chicken and the egg, isn't it, on that one? Is it the vendor's fault or is it the estate agent's? I always think you can't control what goes through the head of a vendor, but you can control what comes out your own mouth. Right, so there you go. The percentage difference is 16.3. The long-term average is 16, 17%. It's the gaps. But again, this is very cyclical in terms of, look, there you go. Isn't that interesting that higher priced properties tend to sell more in the summer and the lower priced properties tend to sell in the winter? There you go. Look at that. Isn't that interesting? Anyway, let's move on. Sell fall through rate this week we fell through on 22.3% of homes. What is that figure? We take the gross sales, we take the fall throughs, and then we do a percentage of the two. And as I said, this week we fell through 6,112 properties. The fall through rate at 22%. So you can see again, ladies and gentlemen, these are the Christmas spikes. You must ignore those because the numbers are so low that it spikes. Just to those that haven't watched the show before, that was the Kwasi Kwarteng budget when it went to 40%. She dropped down to 20%. This is when interest rates rose in 23. So it went up to 30. She drifted down, Christmas spike, and then it rises up. And then, as I said, we're now around that 22% mark. Yeah, it's kind of what we're expecting. I mean, this is, I think, the more important stat, and this stat is what percentage of your sales pipeline is falling through a month. And last month because we always do monthly, 6.1, 6.2%. Anything
Yeah,
else?
I mean, look, obviously those numbers are pretty static. I still think they're a pretty poor indictment of our industry. That a quarter of the time we either pick the wrong buyer or accept instructions from the wrong seller. I understand there'll be circumstances where some of that is completely avoidable, but there are circumstances where a lot of that is completely unavoidable, either through due diligence of the buyer or the correct process of getting the deal through and using the correct partners to help you. The conveyancers that you pick, the mortgage brokers that you're working with, the people doing the sales progression, the questions you ask and upon setup and how you set a deal up can drastically reduce that rate. But as an industry, we just seem to be prepared to do all of the work, but only get paid three out of four times.
Well, interestingly, ladies and gentlemen, next week on Tuesday, the 25th of February, on the ICG, which is the website's called icgapproved.co.uk. You go to the events tab. We're having our monthly ICG webinar, and we're talking about cash flow. And one of those things that we're going to be talking about on the cash flow is sales progression and also reservation agreements. And that will basically, because again, there's a lot of agents out there that are suffering from cash, even though sales pipelines are there, it's not cash in the bank. So therefore, if you are an agent and suffering, then do bear in mind icgapproved.co.uk, go to the events tab and join us on that on the cash flow webinar, which both myself and Ian will be on. Let's get back. UK net sales, the white line. So in terms of net sales, 21,442, which is a slight uptake from last week at 20,600. And again, very, very similar to 2020. In terms of numbers, again, we haven't hit the COVID months yet, which is about 6 weeks, 7 weeks away. And we're not that far off what we were seeing in 21 and 22, when I'll just pull that up now, ladies and gentlemen. We were on 23,000 and 22,000. So we are literally a hair's breadth away in terms of net sales than what we're seeing in the crazy years of 21 and 22. So again, the market's not bad. 19% higher year to date on terms of net sales at 113,600, which again better than net sales at 2024 at 95,000. 21,000, like I said, that's the standalone 6 week net sales. What's your thoughts on net sales, Ian?
Well, as we've said, the market's good. The market's
Yeah,
strong.
can't really say much more, can we?
It's solid. I think I would be saying to every agent, still be cautious with your making sure that you keep a little bit on your balance sheet for a rainy day, because at the moment these deals have got to come out the other end. They've got to turn into invoices and exchanges. Um, and don't leave the cupboard bare. Sadly, as we were talking off air before, I'm dealing with a number of businesses in liquidation or close to liquidation, on behalf of the banks to either breathe life into them or foreclose. Um, and the number of businesses that I'm being asked to look at from that perspective is ever on the increase. And these aren't unsuccessful businesses. They're businesses in times of peak income went on a spending spree. Be sensible, spend on the right stuff, spend on your marketing, spend on stuff that creates income, not stuff that provides easiness in the job. Spend on stuff that gathers pace, makes the snowball run down the hill faster and bigger, not stuff that just makes your life easier, necessarily.
There you go. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're an estate agency boss and you're looking for some opinion, you might not like what you hear because Ian does tell it like it is. But sometimes you need that in life. So I thoroughly recommend if you need someone to almost do an MOT on your business, give them a shout. Gross sales as a percentage of listings and price changes as a percentage of listings. Again, I know a few of you do like those graphs. Oh, I'll tell you what, I did show it last time, but I'll just remind ourselves. We always look at the pound per square foot figures. This is done on a monthly basis. The orange line is the pound per square foot at sale agreed, and that matches the land registry almost perfectly, almost perfectly, 5 or 6 months' time. We haven't got the official February figures through, but that's looking good. So if you notice, since 22, we've been on a bit of a roller coaster, but we've not been rising, but we've not been dropping. But if you are someone that's wanting to judge where the top or the bottom of the market is, just watch that orange line each week or every month, and you'll see where the market's going. Right, Ian, that's the end of the first part of the show. Anything before we go to St Albans?
No, I mean, obviously, I don't know whether lettings is going to be part of your show today, but that's the market that's far more uncertain and is required at the moment. Your sales business, you can, within reason, put a bit of a bow on it and say, right, just crack on. Keep managing prices, keep doing good agency, um, and you'll make a lot of hay while the sun shines. But lettings is a trickier space because there's lots happening legislatively wise. There's lots happening in terms of finance. There's lots happening in terms of the sentiment of wanting to be a landlord or currently continuing to be a landlord. And I would, the bosses and the owners of the businesses that watch your show, that's where you need to be really thinking about what's my next step. How do I take advantage of sorry, I keep calling it renters reform. That's the old label, renters rights. How do I replace the lost income of renewals? What do I need to do with my terms? There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I know from being involved in certain committees and government things, there's no runway for agents. They're not saying to you, right, here it is enacted. You've now got 6 months to get your house in order. They're very clear. On the day it goes live, you're expected to be legal and processed, and they're handing local government the right to pursue you. And the local governments that I've met and talked to and been involved with this process have said, we're skin, pretty much. We will pursue this. It's easy fines. It's an easy way of creating revenue. Now, they don't say it in those terms, Chris, because that would be terrible PR. But if they can go and make 40,000, 7,000, 10,000 off you or your landlords, rather than hunt around for a speeding fine, guess where they're going to go? They're going to come and get you.
Interestingly, ladies and gentlemen, those of you that are in the Northwest, we're having an event at Manchester City's football ground on Thursday, the 8th of May. The ICG, again, Ian and myself are involved in the ICG. So it's a group of prop tech and estate agency suppliers that come together to basically enable everyone to collaborate with each other so we can help agents with our products. We're actually getting David Smith, who's considered the king of lettings legislation, but practical stuff, to come in and tell agents the best way to approach the Renters' Right Bill to keep your landlords happy and also use it as a business opportunity. So again, keep an eye on that one. I don't think the tickets have been released yet, have they? But they will be in the next couple of weeks, I think, Ian, won't they? And that's a free event, isn't it?
It's free for estate agents, yes. The suppliers sponsor it and pay for it. And yeah, the content on it is very, very relevant and very, very powerful to any estate agent, but particularly if you've got a lettings arm. Listening and learning from David Smith is a day you'll never. The ROI on that is.
Which is well, I've been involved with him, and he is absolutely amazing. He's a practical lawyer who actually puts it into language that letting agents understand, and gives you practical stuff on what you need to do with your landlords to ensure that you are more profitable and more successful. So do bear that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. Right. Again, what I would say is this: if you want advanced knowledge of that, if you apply to be on that ICG event, the one next week, you'll go on our mailing list, and then sounding like a bit like an ICG event. But honestly, Ian and myself are big fans of the ICG, and it does help agents. So if you want to get yourself signed up, then when the Manchester tickets get released, you'll be at the top of the queue. Right. Right. Without further ado, therefore, that's the end of the first part of the show. And what we'll now do is now go to St Albans and see how that is. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are using a bit of kit called Insight. Insight is one of a number of platforms that the firm 20EA have. They have other platforms for business generation and other such things, but one of them is called Insight. I must stress for the record that 20EA have not paid me anything to highlight this bit of kit. This bit of kit has enabled us to get the stats that you've already seen in the first part of the show. This, though, enables agents to get the same sort of stats I've shown you, but for locally. And we're going to be using these stats to really deep dive. This week, we're going to St Albans. Oh, just for the benefit of anyone watching, this bit of kit, there is a free version, a freemium version, which but only gives you a very limited amount of data. Then you can buy it on a town, region, or national basis. I'm not going to mention the price. I think it's damn good value for money. Of course, I would say that, but don't mention my name because I'm not on commission. But if you have the town version, you'll see exactly what I'm about to show you now. Okay, so without further ado, Ian, let's go to St Albans. Do you know it well, mate? Do you know St Albans?
No, not as a property market. I've never worked in it or had a client in it. I have sold a business in St Albans on behalf of a seller, so I was aware of. Oh, no, sorry, I'll tell a fib. I sold a business to a St Albans business from an area just outside. But no, I don't. But it is quintessentially a sort of British southern town. Okay, it's North London, but it's or it's north of London, but it's in the southern half of the country, and I would imagine it's about as quintessentially normal as you can get.
Indeed, if there is such a thing as normal, right? Okay, so for the purposes of the benefit of those watching, the postcodes we're looking at is AL1 all the way through to AL4 inclusive. We're going to spend 20 minutes. This is almost like a Rightmove Plus report, ladies and gentlemen, on steroids. The stats that we show you are, as I said, come from 20EA. If you have an issue with any of the stats, then contact 20EA. I must stress to you, the information is considered gold standard. Is it perfect? Nothing is perfect, but you'll be amazed how many agents, big agents and small agents, use this data for their data collection and to see where they are in the market. So without further ado, let's go and have a look. So we're starting off firstly with residential sales, and we are looking at from the 1st of the 1st, 2020, all the way through to the 18th of February 2025. So it's always 5 years plus the year that we are in. we're looking initially at new instructions. We have switched off new builds because I think that just skews the market slightly. And again, on this graph here, you can see the number of properties coming onto the market on a month by month basis. You can see here that in 2020, as with a lot of towns, there were a lot of properties coming on the market in St Albans in 2020, in July 2020, August 2020, and September. You can see those spikes. They are quite pronounced here. I've not really seen 2020 that much bigger. That normally is bigger. Ladies and gentlemen, we do this show every single week. This is our third year of doing it, but that's quite pronounced that the number of properties coming on the market is that great. Interesting. It's normally about 50% more, but not 100% more. Interesting. Right, let's go and have a look. In the last 5 and a bit years, 16,258 properties have come onto the market at an average pound per square foot of £614 per square foot, and an average price of 649,000, which is not inexpensive, is it? You know, that's not cheap. So let's go and have a look and see who the agents are and how well they have been performing. We start off with Frost's. So they're at 594 and they put on 2,841. And in that time, their market share has been 17,047. They've got some, where are these spikes? Right. Now, right, that's interesting. You know, there's a certain agency called Connell Sequence, and I know they have different names around the country. Tend to have a spike up in December because they have their Boxing Day launch. It appears that Frost they do a negative um, um, Boxing Day, and it looks like if you look, their spike is always greater in January. Isn't that interesting? I've not seen that before. What's your thoughts on that, Ian?
Imagine it follows the logic of their campaigning. If they're telling people to list in before Christmas for Boxing Day, then you'd expect to see a spike. If as is becoming just as popular now, don't get caught up in that. Do it in January, then you're going to see a spike in January. I would have thought. Certainly, over the 2 months, you'll always see a spike. I think. Um,
What is particularly interesting, it looks like this year they didn't do it so much, but if you look here, the downward spike in December, and I know the numbers are lower in December, but not mass, you know, but the corresponding spike back up in Jan doesn't make up for the drop in December. Although January is a bigger month, so probably if we did look at the raw numbers, they're about the same. It looks like they didn't do that this December, so or if they did, it wasn't so great. But looking
Well,
at
I think there was so many reasons to be on the market ahead because of trying to beat the stamp duty deadline that good agents would have adapted their process. There was a little bit of loud negativity about Boxing Day. I think some agents got on their high horse. It always amuses me when someone slags off someone else's strategy, and it's like, Christ, guys, just get on with what you're doing. There tends to be this sort of righteous group that believe what they do is right, and they're very, very noisy about what they do. But you very rarely, they very rarely tell you what it is they're doing. They just simply pipe up to say what the other guy's doing wrong. Now they're entitled to their opinion, but guys, keep it to yourselves. If they're doing it wrong, why would you want to tell them? Particularly if they're a competitor. But look, what's more interesting for me on this chart is that you have good, strong independents at the top, and you can see the corporates tend to collect at the bottom. And virtually any market, anywhere in the UK, with the odd exception, you've got the corporates at the bottom and you have the good independents at the top. That tells us everything about leadership, uh, profitability, desirability to work for them. If you're a young person out there and you want to go and get trained properly, go to the top of the table, not the bottom.
Well, interestingly, I would say Connells and William H. Brown, which are part of the Connell Sequence group, I would expect them normally to be middle of the table. And in some instances, they are at the top. They don't normally as far down, but it looks like St Albans is the independents seem to be dominant, but dominant further down the trend. Now, interestingly, I believe Frosts are used to be part of LSLI, and then if you recall, 18 months ago, LSL sold off their network to I believe Frosts are part of a small, not that small actually, but a decent sized regional network of LSL.
Yeah, we do a lot of recruitment for them, but even in LSI's hands, they were still run and maintained as an independent.
Yes.
LSI, although it was corporate owned, it to be fair to LSL, LSI, whichever, they were left largely, um, with their identity, their brand, and their processes. Okay, there was clearly some consolidation that went on at head office because that would be natural. But just typically speaking, you're going to see that the two or three agents at the top, and you always see two or three agents that are away with the fairies. They're dominating the market. You can see two there that do with a couple sort of roughly half their market share sat underneath them. That's a very common state, but it does indicate this consolidation we're seeing in the market is going to continue because there can't. I mean, I don't know about some of the ones down the bottom. I've not heard of their name. They might be new entrants. They might be new homes businesses. That's why their numbers are very small, or they might be very high end, and therefore they're dealing with uber high end. But these charts are going to shrink. There's going to be less agents, individual brands. There might be more self-employed agents working within those brands, but I think the number of brands in the UK will reduce. Um, and
Well, I mean,
consolidate over the coming years.
I don't disagree with you. I mean, I find it fascinating that there are 14,500 estate agency brands in the UK, and to be in the top 5,000, you only need to sell 2.1 homes a month. I mean, I mean, that is a huge tail. And just think about it, all those agents that are only selling that small amount of number are being charged a lot of money from Rightmove. Let's move on. So, I mean, again, looks like 2020 was a poor year. Looks like they've grown, stabilized, slight drop in 23, but looks like they've nicely stabilized in 2024. Okay, let's go to Ashton's, which are a regional brand in Hertfordshire. Um, and again, there you can see here that decent operation run by right, here we go. So we've got around 10%, and then we've got a slight drift downwards, but it looks like you've pulled it back in 24 and things are looking on the up. So that's good on Ashes. I think their run, it's like a 6 or 7 branch network in that part of Hertfordshire. I was just racking my brain. Sorry about that. I had a bit of brain fog there, ladies and gentlemen. So that's good news on Ashton's. So slight market growth there. Cassidy and Tate. Oh dear, looks like they had a bad 20 and 21 and 22. And yeah, although their price is at 738, we will look at the top quartile in a second. Let's go and look at Bradford Howley. Just jump in any time, mate, when you see anything. Looks like they had a decent 22 and 23, but have had a slight drifting off in 22, 24. Collinson and Hall. Where are these
You
spikes?
could have a really dynamite section to your show if you had these top three or four agents on to debate these numbers. It would be great to watch the owners of businesses debate these numbers at the same time because they'll all have different reasons for their drops and their increases. Um,
I think that might be a line that's overstepping the mark. I'm not sure most agents would do that. It looks like they do a Boxing Day. Looks like they're doing Boxing Days. Did you do a Boxing Day this year? No, you didn't. So that's interesting. Collinson Hall, the 3 years before, did a Boxing Day launch, but didn't this year. Okay, let's go and look at Paul Barker's. That's nicely growth from around 3 or 4% to around 5 or 6%. Let's go and look at Hampton's. Slight growth there. We will look at the upper quartile in a second, ladies and gentlemen. Connell's. Growth as well. Hartford Homes, you're growing as well. Well done. William H. Brown. Again, those are the Boxing Day
some of
spikes.
these ones down the bottom, I don't think their physical office geographically sits in St Albans. I think they probably do a little bit of St Albans from somewhere else.
Some of them do because what we do is I email we go on Google, find out the telephone numbers, and if they have a St Albans code, I do recognize a lot of these names. It just smaller agents. Northwood. Some of them though, Ian, are also there's a little suburban little villagettes in the AL1 to AL4, which then they specialize in that little, they're dominant in that little area. Um, but when you actually then blast it across the whole ones, they look small. I'll go down, I'll just briefly just go down. There we go. Stratton Park. We will do the upper quartile in a second. I'll just go down. Well done, Whitaker's, JW's. Okay. There we go. Let's go and look at the upper quartile, and then we'll go and see if there's any new people coming on board. Okay. So 16,000, here we go. Okay, so the upper quartile starts at 750, and we'll see who the dominant agent. That's Foster's. That's very similar to what it was. Let's just knock off and go the real posh bits. So it looks like Cassidy and Tate seem to be, and let's just go to the 2 millions. Then the Hamptons and your Struts and your Savills kick in. Let's just have a quick look at that 1 million range. Which is again where notice looks like the 1 million to 2 million, the local posh agents kick in, and then when you go to 2 million, they bring in the likes of your Hamptons, your Struts, and your
And where people like Hampton, Savile, Struts exist, that's again typical. Although I do think that is a market that the good independents that have broken into the section below should be starting to look at that and say, right, I can get a bit of that as well. I do think um, uh, there is good growth in a business by manoeuvring its average house price up, just by moving it up a rung, if you like. Not necessarily trying to go after the 5 million plus, but just a company I work with in North London, they did a brilliant job of sort of moving themselves out of the fairly high end flat market, but they moved them. They weren't necessarily selling any more units, but the value of the units was so much higher. But guess what? Those family units attracted the people moving out of the garden flats to buy them. So they ended up with,
yeah.
it's a magnet. It's a magnet anyway. But there is a little bit because I don't, Savills, of course, their branding is brilliant. Hamptons, their branding is brilliant, but I don't think they're individual people could stand toe to toe in a slug fight with a good solid independent business. They might have
There are exceptions to the rule, I'll give them that, but fundamentally, toe to toe, you would expect someone with 30 years experience running their own business should be able to knock Savills up. And I say that
I
with
don't, I don't even necessarily think the number of years experience, but I mean if somebody's got the craft and guile of agent of yesteryear, either trained into them or because they come from yesteryear, um, they are likely to just fight that little bit harder and faster and sharper than the guy that's got the brand that makes in those brands, the brand maketh the man. In the other businesses, it's the man that maketh the brand, and the man that maketh the brand should be able to elevate themselves up a little
I
bit.
love that. I'm stealing that one off you.
Please do.
Right, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, you can see why we get Ian back on. He's top value for money. Okay, let's just have a look. This is the last year. Let's just see if there's anyone that's just coming up on the rails. Have we? Interestingly, I can't see EXP. So there's an opportunity there. EXP. Any other self-employed models? Yope is a self-employed model. No, interestingly, it looks like, unless some of these agents here have some agents within them, looks like St Albans is right for the picking on a self-employed model. And ladies and gentlemen, do have a look at the stats I chuck out. There is some interesting stats coming on that. Anything on that before we go and have a look at whether the agents are actually selling this stuff or not? Should we move on?
No, I think we've covered that off.
Right, so this particular screen is my favorite screen, and just for those of you who've not watched it, this is looking at the last 2 years. So from the 18th of February 23 to the 18th of Feb 2025. There's a lot of data on here, and a lot of agents don't tend to like data, but the data is where the magic is. And this is, if you want more listings and you want to stop losing listings to overvaluing or cheap fees, then the best way to do it is to use emotion and logic. And this is where your logic comes in. So what I want you to do, ladies, agents watching this, I want you to totally ignore new instruction market share, sale agreed and sale agreed market share. I'm not, it's the percentage, sorry, that's not what we're looking at today. I want you to look at these four columns here. This is where the true magic is. And there is some absolute gold in here for some agents, and there are some absolute dire stuff for agents in here. And if I was one of these agents where the numbers are truly amazing, I would be really using this in my kit bag to try and get, well, to prove that I'm a better estate agent. Now, Ian, I know you know this, but those people have not watched. When a property leaves an estate agent's book,
Just on a point on that, Chris, I think some of the stuff that you write for agents is where you direct them well. Is the fact that boasting about good numbers is not you and me slightly differ in the fact that I think there is a place for that, but only if supported by the story behind it. Um,
Indeed. Yeah, I
and
mean, yeah, you need
I know that you do a lot of good stuff with some of my clients and lots of people that aren't my clients, but certainly people I know where you help them build their market share by because it's not the data that's the magic, it's the interpretation of the story behind the data and how you then translate that either into a picture on the sofa or your marketing material that's going through inboxes, through letterboxes, through posters, through whatever it is you're doing to put your brand out there, window cards. Um, and these stats for some of these guys is showing the leadership story that you need to get on your ass and train your people. And some of it's saying, right, there's a marketing story in here that's a magnet to landlords and sellers. Not landlords in this particular one, but I know you have data that would provide that information. But I do also know that you know how to interpret that data. And I think that's the problem with a lot of the big companies. They have data analysis and marketing departments to do it for them. I'm not sure the people on the ground floor know how to do it, but I'm not sure they need to. The machine just spits it out. But the smaller independent who's a very, very good estate agent might look at these numbers and just get number blindness, or either be just happy with the numbers or be angry with the numbers, but actually not do anything about it. Um, it's these numbers engaging with people like you that I think, well, not think, I know will generate ROI out the other end for these guys and girls because that's where the magic is. It's not in the numbers itself; it's in the story that got you to these numbers.
very kind of you to say. Anyway, let's get back. I don't like talking about myself, so let's get back on onto this. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're looking at these four columns here, right? If you add up the exchange percentage and the withdrawal percentage on each row, they add up to 100%. And the reason being is this. And again, I'm explaining this really nice and slowly because, again, people might get number blindness. But a property only leaves an estate agent's books if she exchanges or withdraws. Okay, so in the last 2 years, okay, Frosts have had 622 and 465, which is 1,887 properties. I've left Frost's book with those postcodes, of which 622 have exchanged, which is 57.2. Okay.
Plus their current pipeline, to be fair to them.
True, but we're looking at we're looking at stuff that's at, this is not their pipeline. This is what's left their pipeline in the last 2 years. Okay. Meanwhile, Ashton's have exchanged contracts on 64%, and Bradford and Howley have exchanged contracts on 66, whilst Cassidy and Tate and Collinson Hall at 52 and Hampton's at 45.
Just sorry, Chris, just so I can make sure that people can understand the data and not making the same mistake that I am. If exchanged and withdrawn adds up to 100%,
Yes.
where are the ones that are under offer and not yet exchanged? Where
Well,
do
they
they exist on this table?
we're not looking at the pipeline, we're just looking at outcomes here. Okay, so we haven't got a pipeline number here because we're not showing pipeline numbers. This is in the last 2 years, how many houses you put on the market? That's that column, and the share. That's a standalone figure.
Yeah,
How many properties have you sold, and what percentage of your listings have you sold? But again, we all know sold subject to contract means nothing.
yeah.
And this is a poorly presented chart. This needs to be split up into many different charts.
No, I get it. They're obviously a lot of agents. Frost will be one based on the previous stat that they will have a pretty big pipeline. I'm not sure where that comes in on this chart. But anyway, don't labour on it.
Well, okay, the point is that they've sold 750.
So the difference between 750 and 622 is probably in their pipeline or aborted.
Yes, and remember, saying we're looking at how many properties have Frost sold? This is this column here, standalone. How many properties have you sold subject to contract in those last 2 years in those postcodes, right? Completely separately, these four columns here is in the last 2 years of what actually left your books, 57 have exchanged and 42 have withdrawn and sold.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. We're taking snapshots on different parts of the process. The magic thing is to actually compare yourself with the competitors. So therefore, if you're looking at the top 10, Paul Barker at 66, if I was going up against Hamptons, you could say, Mrs. Miggins, you have a 2 in 3 chance of getting moved, whilst with Hamptons, you're only at 45.
Oh
less
yeah,
than.
having the evidence to, I would always coach evidence-based selling. So I wouldn't just tell the client, I would then produce the evidence, i.e. this type of spreadsheet or some sort of chart. I know you're not in favor of those type of things, but I would want it
Yes,
evidence.
I'm in fan of them, but not publishing them on social media, but using them in the house.
Oh yeah, yeah. In terms of the pitch, yeah, absolutely.
No, definitely, you should be using this. You should be pulling this out.
But I'm not entirely sure that a strap line that, I think the entire industry should be ashamed that 53.33% is our combined effort.
Well,
Um,
that's the 53% is the national average, and in St Albans, it's the same as well, 53.
I know,
In
but I just think that should be something that we should, the leaders and the thought leaders, fix that problem, guys, because we don't need the market to be any bigger. We just need more of it to turn into an invoice. Um, and the problem is these instructions are churning. They're going from one agent to the next, to the next, to the next, partly because of overvaluing, partly because of, weak leadership accepting a property into the business that you shouldn't. Well, I'm not gonna say too much because it's not fair on my clients, but some of them they won't take instructions from somebody that's been on the market with three previous agents and just wants you to try the same thing at the same price with the same photos. A waste of time.
yeah,
But we should, as an industry, really hold our head in shame and say, right, if we sat in the lounge and said, as an industry, you've got a 1 in 2 chance that we'll get you moved. We've got a 1 in 2 chance you're going to fail. No wonder people are reluctant to put their houses up for sale, and that it's such a big decision to try and move because they've got too many barriers to success, which is largely us.
yes, we get in the way. Just a big shout out to Hartwood Homes at 73. That's really good. And David Chadwick at 72, and Louise Sanders at 73. That's really good. But there are some numbers here. So again, let's just have a quick look and just see fall through rates, 25.6%. Is there any big ones or small ones? Not really. Where Fine and Country at 33, that's slightly on the higher side, but the low numbers. Let's just see price reductions. Who's working their stock? Uh, Lowest 39, Ashton's. So, and then we've got some biggest, the average is 44% of properties get reduced. This is quite nice. Oh, well, who's that one? Hamptons, that's quite low at 24. These are nice and tight. Let's move on to the next report. Now, there's a lot happening here, ladies and gentlemen. So again, let me dissect this for you. So what we're looking at here is the properties that you have put onto the market in the last couple of years that have subsequently gone through to exchange and completion. Okay. And what happens here is this, okay, is of the properties that have gone through to exchange in the last couple of years, when the property came on the market, 20EA had an automated valuation model, like a Valpal figure, their own version, others are available, and looked at what you put the market or property on the market for versus what they thought the house was worth. And that gap, that percentage gap, is this orange number here. So therefore, Frost's overvalued by 2.43% and Ashton's 1.54. This is on the properties that ended up exchanging, right? This is not the properties that came onto the market that you did overvalue and then subsequently didn't sell. That this doesn't include that. This is just the stuff that ended up exchanging. So the stuff that those of you that did overvalue and didn't exchange, that number will be hell of a lot more. So on average, Frosts on the exchanges that have done in the last couple of years have overvalued by an average of 2.43%. The average is 1.86. Isn't it interesting that Ashton's at number two had a lower price change at 39 because their overvaluing was lower at 1.54. So there's a direct relationship between price changes and whether you overvalue or not.
I
Now,
think I think with these very small margins here, though, I think the term overvaluing is a little unfair.
tr okay, it is.
It,
I'll
it
take
could
that.
be that it could be that the strategy is, let's they may
Let's
have
try
valued
it.
the property correctly, but said let's try a little higher, or the owner might, It's when it's sort of 3, 4, 5%, you know, that overvaluing is
Okay, I'll take that. And again, ladies and gentlemen, this is on the properties that actually ended up exchanging. So there's going to be some what would be useful for 20 EAs if they created stats on the overvaluing on the ones that didn't sell. But okay, I'll give you that, Ian. These numbers are quite tight. The average is 1.86, and there's not some. Last week we were in a couple of weeks ago we were in London, and these numbers were at 5 or 6%.
Yeah,
So
and that's where it's that's where you have to start to question: is there a absolute strategy from top or from the valuer to use price as a weapon to win the instruction versus sound policy? But I mean I know agents where the selling price is greater than the listed price. They have a completely different strategy. They have a bottoms up strategy, which is it's worth 1 million, but let's put it on offers in excess of 900. We'll get so much interest, we'll bid people up.
indeed. Right, let's move on. This column here shows you the price achieved from the original asking price. Okay, so therefore, Frost overvalued by sorry, put the ones on the exchange on at 2.3 on average, and then took 5.1% less than the original asking price. And you can just go down through there. Now, again, percentages are not particularly a lot of people like. So therefore, what 20 EA say is this: if all of you put on a £700,000 house, what would you achieve for it? And again, here, look, if Cassidy's were going up against Ashton's, they could say, on average, we get £2,800 more than the average St Albans agent, and we get X thousand pounds more than the other agent. So if you were up against another agent saying they're charging £500 more, if I was Bradford and Howley, I could say, yeah, but I'm going to get you £3,000 more. You've got to spend three, you're going to spend 500 to get three back. That is where you prove undervaluing. Great. Okay, let's move on. Let's see which agents are shifting their houses quicker. And we can see here that on average, it takes 73 days to get a property sale agreed for 2024 compared to 63 days in 2023. The blue lines here show you how quick you get properties sold. So new instruction to sale agreed is 49 days. You can see that. We'll just go down the graph here. You can see how quickly you are taking. It looks like everyone's taking roughly the same amount of time to get a sale through. Ashton's at 66 days, new instruction to completion 208. Frost's the biggest agent, 71 days and 213 days total. And again, just shows you if you were an agent who got sales through quicker and your sales progression was quicker, your graph would be further off to the left. And again, would be great stuff to prove if you wanted to get homeowners that needed to move quickly. Finally, I appreciate time's cracking on. Let's go look at the lettings market, and we'll just have a quick look, just see the average rent in St Albans in 2020 was 1,346, and this year roughly 1,800, so it has gone up. Let's just have a quick look now. I'm just going to just wait for that to kick in. Wait, there we go. Right, here we go. So let's look and see which agents are moving. And again, this is new instructions, which again, we don't know what the portfolios are, but what we do tend to find is that there is a direct relationship between new listings and size of portfolio. Frost's, that's Frost's. Looks like there's a bit of growth there. So I wonder if they've bought something. I'm not sure. Northwood. Wait for that to kick in. Okay. Wait, it's a bit slow. So that's Northwood, decent 21. Oh, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, do apologise. So it looks like you've had some growth there. So well done, Northwood in St Albans there. Let's go look at leaders. There's a slight drifting downwards there. Let's go look at open rent. Ladies and gentlemen, look, 5%, and we're now 15%.
By far, they are the biggest threat to the lettings industry beyond any legislation, beyond any. They are by far the big, or possibly were, but right now they represent the biggest threat because they are doing what Purple Bricks failed to do in the residential sales market, and they're reaching tipping point. They're reaching the point where their brand no longer needs advertising.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've got stats because, as I said, my daytime job is I'm a property statistician, and open rent. If they were a letting agent, then numbers 2 to number 14 or 15, if you had to put all those agents nationally together, they would still not be as big as Open Rent. And this is the scary bit, okay? 51.2% of the houses that Open Rent have put on the market in the last 2 years were previously on the market with a high street agent. Actual addresses, we've tracked it through 20 EA. It's scary. So basically, this growth here, this is like a base level of just normal landlords that never used agents. Okay, this growth here, and it's the same nationally, they're taking properties off you and putting them through Open Rent. Now, one thing that I give advice and opinion to letting agents on how to retain landlords and make sure they don't go elsewhere. And you do that through data and meetings and that sort of thing to ensure that then you know that they're getting value for money. Because again, you're absolutely right, Ian. Most agents, they just bring up landlords with problems. They don't actively manage it. They call it property management, but they're not managing it. They're just collecting the rent and sorting the problems. Let's go down. Gem Lettings. Okay, slight drifting downwards there. They're suffering a bit. Looks like they could do with some landlords. Gem, if you need some more landlords, give me a call. Collinson Hall, you look like you're growing. Space, nice and steady. Ashton's, nice and steady. Cassidy and Tate. We'll just go down. There we go. Martin Coat, Space. We'll go down to 20 and then we'll give final words to Ian. Just do those. Actually, I'll go down to 25 because I know there's some names that I recognize. Okay, Ian. Final thoughts, please.
Well, I think the final thoughts are pretty obvious that sales milk it while it's in our favour, and the market's definitely moving in our favour at this moment in time, but both in terms of volume of opportunity and fees and various things we're seeing starting to move in the right direction. Make sure you milk that as much as you can. Make sure you keep a little bit aside for a rainy day. On lettings, you probably need to be either making sure your senior team are involved in preparations for. So many agents are saying to me, I'm going to wait until it's enacted, the renters' rights bill. Waiting until it is enacted is it's self-harm. Get ready now, get yourself prepared, get your new contracts, get your new tenancy agreements, get your new strategies, get your new pricing models, um, get your understanding of how to deflect or defend against open rent or even attack, and have key strategies moving forward into that space. Don't wait for the problem to happen because you'll be behind the curve and you'll see your market share getting eaten away either by people leaving the space or by landlords moving to agents they believe are informed, knowledgeable and understandable of what's required in the new world once the right renters' rights is enacted. Um, so I think there's a lot of work for owners to, and most owners are sales agents that have lettings. And it worries me that they see lettings as a sort of, I'll deal with it later on. Um, I think it's something that needs to be right at the forefront of their thinking at the moment, particularly because sales is largely trundling along looking after itself within reason. Of course, it's going to need direction and all the bits and pieces, but it's not going to self harm at the moment, I don't think.
Ian, fantastic insight as always. We look forward to seeing you in a few months' time. If you want to go to any of those ICG events, icgapproved.co.uk. My name is Chris Watkin. If you're a St Albans agent and you're looking for some help and guidance on retaining and growing your lettings business, do give me a call. That's my daytime job. And thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you next week for the next Property Market Stat Show.